Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. I'm at the NYIT Auditorium on Broadway for my Screen Actors Guild Foundation BroadwayWorld Conversation Q&A series, which celebrates the vibrant theater community here in New York City and the union actors who aspire to have a career on both stage and screen. My guests today are three of the stars of the hit Broadway musical Something Rotten. Please welcome Brian Darcy James, Christian Borle, and Brad Oscar. Enjoy.
Shakespeare is cream of the crop. The one where William Shakespeare is top. Welcome to the Renaissance, to the 16th century experience. The age has flown, the olden days are over. We bid them adieu. Well, hallelujah.
What are you each enjoying the most about bringing Something Rotten to Broadway?
The paycheck, which is lovely. We're very happy to be working.
That is true, yes.
Well, sure. I mean, we're very blessed to do what we love and, get paid for it. But also, I think we're all very excited that we're doing a brand new, original American musical comedy, not based on anything prior. Yeah, but some very talented people sat in a room and thought up, and then we've been blessed to go along for the ride with a creative team and a company that you dream of.
Yeah.
Also, we had such a great time building it and rehearsing it. And I think, when you're in a rehearsal room, we were in this crazy room at what is now the Lyric Theater. And the rehearsal room there has no windows and no phone service. So you're basically in a bunker. And what we started to notice was that when you weren't in a particular scene, if you had the opportunity to go outside and take a break, nobody was leaving the room. We were all sitting in the room watching each other work and laughing hysterically at each other. And so I think it's gratifying for all of us to get into the theater and share what we kind of had, like a little secret. And to see everyone laughing as hard as they're laughing is very gratifying.
What is it like living in the world of Something Rotten? It's such a clever musical.
Well, again, what's so exciting is I can stand backstage watching his huge number, watching the faces of the audience who don't know what's coming next, plot-wise, because it's an original story, but also what Casey has done. Casey Nicola, the director and choreographer, who has topped himself, I think. Just watching the wave after wave of laughter and applause happen, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's great. And it's, obviously the cast becomes your family. You become, and the crew and everybody backstage. I mean, it takes a small gay village to put on a musical, as we know. And there literally are, 100 people in that building from front of house to, everybody comes together. And I think that's a very random mix. So you never know what you're going to get as far as that goes. And I think, again, because of what started in the rehearsal studio and now what is happening on stage at the St. James, it's such a joyous experience. The show itself is so joyous. It celebrates everything that many of us fell in love with, the American musical comedy. And that energy, and then, Casey being our leader, and then nightly having, Brian and John Cariani and Christian, I mean, everybody up there. Just this forward motion and this joy, and it's really a great place to come to work. I hope we run just so that this can be my family for as long as that would be, not just because, I want a job and all. I mean, I really would love to come to the theater 8 times a week for as long as it will be, because these are the situations that, you sort of pray for. We've all done shows where, there are difficult people, or the show is just a downer, and it's hard to come out of that sometimes, but this has just been really such a joyous time.
And it speaks to Casey, too. Casey is so good at collecting a group of people that are hardworking professionals and who are grateful.
Yeah.
And I think that energy actually shoots out over the footlights.
Well, let's get into Casey then. Casey Nicola is the Tony Award-winning director-choreographer of this show. You've seen many of his shows. What was the rehearsal room? What's his room like to work in?
Happy.
Yeah.
Relaxed. He was a performer, and so I think he understands how grueling it can be. I mean, it's always fun, so when we say grueling, take it with a grain of salt, but they're long days, and he knows instinctively when it's time to just kind of say, you know what, I think we should all just go home.
Yeah.
But beyond that, he expects everyone to be prepared. He expects everyone to bring their A game, and I think because we all love him and respect him, he brings that out in people. But it's a lot of laughter.
And what amazed me the most about Casey was, I think we've all worked with directors and or choreographers who were performers, and they moved to the other side, and something sometimes changes, just in their demeanor or their attitude, or suddenly they can't just be one of the kids anymore, you know, one of the chorus or whatever. And that is so not the case with Casey. I've never worked with anyone who has gone to the other side, had the success that he has had, and is still one of us, still one of the kids. He's still, we're all in there, we're putting on a show. And that impressed me the most, that he has maintained this very grounded, very centered. He gets it. He knows what it's all about. He knows what we're doing 8 times a week, how to get the best out of us. And when you have a director and a choreographer whose energy is like that, you only want to do your best. You want to be at your best. There's nothing less.
And what I love about his choreography, too, is that he builds dances for dancers to be able to do 8 times a week.
Yeah.
And so everyone can go out and give 100% every time because he understands.
You know, and he shapes a show beautifully. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that a director choreographer has to do is shape a show, and I think no one shapes a show better than he does.
No, and believe me, our writers put their trust in Casey, knowing that, you know, again, the track record that he has. And I know it was very hard for them along the way at times, because Casey would make suggestions and would say, I really think, I mean, we cut a beautiful ballad from Act 2 of our show. It's a beautiful song. You know, I teared up every time I heard it. Sung so beautifully by the 4, you know, the 2 loving couples. But ultimately, it just wasn't right for the show. And I mean, that was one of the bigger examples, but you know, along the way, so much stuff has to go. And they put their trust in Casey, and I could see at times they were gritting their teeth, and they were like, oh my God, all right, we'll put our trust in Casey. But ultimately, it was the right thing to do. And you have to have somebody, yeah, because it is such a collaboration. So there's got to, the buck has to stop somewhere. You have to have, ultimately, we're all on the same page with one vision, but somebody has to be leading that vision. Somebody has to be taking us across the desert, through the Red Sea, to the other side.
I just got the chills.
Yeah, where's your Moses now? Yeah, where's your Moses now?
Because you guys didn't go out of town, which you could have done, but I love this. They're one of the first musicals to have actually put themselves together in New York and work on their show, you know, with a New York audience. What did you each take away from that experience of doing this show in town and working through it in here?
Well, it speaks to our producer, Kevin McCullum, has been developing this for actually quite a while. He and Carrie Kirkpatrick, one of our writers, were school chums together. I think they've known each other since school. And as musicals now are developed over the course of years, there were readings, and we did a lab in September, and then it was scheduled to go to Seattle. But there was something that happened in the lab, in that rehearsal room, September into October, that was just a very particular type of alchemy that Kevin looked at and just said, I don't want to mess with that. I don't want to risk losing any of these elements. And so he just boldly pulled the trigger. And so there is an element of, well, hope this goes well in front of New York audiences. But the lab gave us all, I think, a great boost of confidence, because we all felt like we were in the right slots. We were all feeling okay.
Yeah.
But it was a risk. You take a chance. There's nothing worse than previewing in the fishbowl of New York City. I mean, especially these days when everybody is right online after the show, writing what they thought, you know. And I mean, it doesn't, I mean, if you're in Chicago, they can write the same things online and read the same thing. But nonetheless, we know plenty of shows that have not had an out-of-town tryout, have done the work here in the city. And if word of mouth starts off bad and people start talking, it can be a very tough climb to get back on the other side. You know, I think we were very lucky. The show was playing well when we got it in front of audiences early in previews, and we were able to work under the microscope, but with something that still ultimately was working, even though we did do a lot of work on Act 2, and we were in there rehearsing every day in previews. I mean, it was exhausting. It was stuff you usually would do out of town, and I'm a big proponent of out-of-town tryouts, especially for a musical, because you don't know how this show is going to breathe until you get it in front of an audience. And you take a risk, again, when that audience is a New York audience right away, and not Seattle, where we were going to go. But fortunately, in this case, you know, it did work out because the bones were there.
Yeah.
And there is something particularly, there's a major charge
Yeah.
to being in New York City on Broadway trying out new material and then falling flat on your face, knowing that you get to come back the next day. But when we were, I loved the preview process of tinkering and cutting and trying new lines and pitching new lines, and the writers were very patient. There's one part in the musical where there's just a flurry of musical theater references in the second act that we've folded into the story of Hamlet. And at one point, the Queen comes out and says to Brian Darcy James, "Your behavior is, confusing for the king and I." And then I pitched them on. I really wanted to then say, "Verily, 'twas a puzzlement, gong." And we in the rehearsal room, or on stage in rehearsals, thought that was the funniest thing. And we were like, "Oh, but that's not the right gong. It's got to be a different gong. And then it's really got to have like a wong to it." And I got out there in my fat suit, and I was like so excited. I was like, "Oh, here we go." And he said, "King and I," big laugh. And I said, "Verily, 'twas a puzzlement, gong." And it was silent, absolute silence.
How did it all come about for you guys originally? Were you there from the very beginning?
I did. I guess I was there. We have these process. We do a 29-hour reading, which basically is a week-long reading where you end up on the Friday doing it at music stands just for people to hear it. So I was involved in a 29-hour reading in January of 2014. Yeah, just a year and a half ago, not even. And then the lab in the fall, which is when you joined. Yes, had you done anything prior?
No, I saw that reading in that room.
Right,
we ended up rehearsing
exactly.
it.
Yes, yes.
And Will Chase was playing Shakespeare, who's a dear friend of mine who makes me laugh hysterically. And I just remember watching it. I laughed the whole time, and then I stole all his good stuff.
That's what all great people
fine.
do.
He's making TV money.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
We don't feel bad for Will Chase.
Talk about the roles that you play and what you love about them.
Wow. Well, I love, because I am such a fan of the musical theater since a very young age, it is quite thrilling to go out there and be the guy who gets to channel all of these fabulous references and start that ball rolling.
Yeah.
And it's a very joyous role, and it's it's a number that is just so much damn fun to do, and I don't think we ever thought it would get the reactions that it seems to be getting nightly. I keep waiting for the other tap shoe to drop because this can't, but it's crazy. I kept trying to justify it early on, invited dress rehearsal. Oh, it's our friends. Of course they loved it. Oh, early previews. Well, they're just eager to see the show. Of course they loved it. But night after night, it really, and again, a total tribute to Casey Nicholaw and the 20-some-odd people who are up there on stage living the dream and doing a number, again, that celebrates so much of what we all fell in love with. So really, I can't still believe it's my life.
Totally. Christian, for you.
I don't know what's going on that I can enjoy playing a jerk so much, because he's a jerk. And that's really fun. I guess there's some kind of, I'm exorcising something, I suppose. But I never imagined I would be playing a part that really was contingent upon the tightest pants possible, and the codpiece does half the work. And it's one of the best entrances ever. It's just unbelievable. But again, so much of it was just built in because of the writing and because of Casey. Like, these weren't like, oh, how am I going to... And it was just like, it was handed on a silver platter, all this amazing, the costumes, the words. There's nothing greater, and I know you feel this. I know I can hear it. There's nothing greater than being on stage in a comedy and knowing that you've got a line coming up that is so well written that you don't have to do anything except just make sure they hear it. And timing is part of it and all of that. And, you add your own little grace notes. But to be able to not have to spin a line and just say it, and the whole night is full of that, I find.
It is, because we've all done material where you have to work to make the material work.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do that. We just need to go out there and do what we do and what we've created and, and our spin. Yeah.
Oh, my...
Oh, here he comes, Brian Darcy James.
In a summer suit.
Brian Darcy James!
That must be Thomas Pink.
Wow. Or they gave it to you from Scoundrels, right? Hi, how are you?
God.
Hello. I was in the neighborhood.
Take it away, Brian.
Thought he dropped by.
How are you, buddy?
Sorry to be late.
How was brunch?
Delicious.
We began talking about this wonderful hit show you're all in. What has the whole experience been like for you, Brian, with working on this show? What has it meant to you so far?
Well, someone was in the middle of a sentence.
It wasn't going to be that good. Believe me, I'd worked it all out. You saved me.
What is it like, Richie?
Yeah.
It's intoxicating is the first word that comes up. I've used many times because it's such a joyful and joyous show, and it's funny, and it makes us laugh, and it makes the people that see it laugh. So I was talking this morning about the different shows that people are in, and Michael Cerveris, who's doing Fun Home, and I think it's fair to say we've all had moments in our careers where we've had to do things that weren't as bubbly as this, and you tend to kind of take those roles home, and it's hard to shed that, when you're playing a very emotional, maybe even a dark character. And so there's something extraordinary about getting done with the show and just feeling like you have nowhere to go but this. You're just going to keep going like that after the show. That's how I feel. So it really is energizing, and it makes me happy.
Yeah. Everybody said they say the same thing. It was a happy rehearsal room. It's a happy company. It's a happy show.
Yeah.
That was the right answer.
Oh, good.
That was the right
Good for
answer.
you.
You're good.
Thank you. Excellent. Now, round two, Brian.
Commit. What a ripoff.
That's the difference between he and I. He would be in a cab.
Whose dressing room is the go-to dressing room? Is there one? Is there a hub backstage at the St. James?
May I?
Yes, you may. Sure.
So, the theater is a wondrous place, full of incredibly generous people. No one more generous than Brian Darcy James, who I think we can talk about contracts. Contractually had the first pick of dressing rooms.
Now, see, that's news to me.
Yeah. We went to the theater together and we scouted the dressing rooms, and there was a dressing room that was the dressing room. And I said to him afterwards, "So what's it going to be?" And he's like, "I just don't care." I was like, "No, come on, you got to pick." He's like, "Why don't we flip a coin?" I said, "No. You have to pick. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. You have to pick." And then I picked the second one, and he just really didn't care. And this asshole, he finally was like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, here's what I would do with that room." And so I have a bar in the room that people can come and drink, and that's what it's kind of become.
Beautiful.
But it's because of this. Who does that? I wouldn't have done it. Who are you?
I am someone who should take more notice about where they're going to be living for the next year.
Exactly.
But you have no stairs. Brian is right
true.
off the stage deck, so
true.
that's your trade-off, I guess.
Yes,
you have
it
no
is.
stairs.
It is very true.
You have Grand Central Station outside your dressing room door, but you have no stairs to climb.
I want to go back to the beginning for each of you. Where did your love for performing begin, and what were your early creative outlets?
I was a small kid, and it was, having an outlet where you could be accepted. That's how it starts to grow. If you can make people laugh, that's also infectious. But it really wasn't until I had amazing teachers, luckily, my whole life that were very encouraging. It wasn't until really high school where a friend of mine dragged me to the Oklahoma audition, and I wowed them with my 4'11" Will Parker, and fell in love with the girl playing Ado Annie, who was a senior. And that was it. That was really it. And really, the teachers that I had in Pittsburgh were so encouraging and so wonderful, and made me feel. I remember you telling the story of like the first person who made you feel like you could do this, like this is an option. It boggled the mind, and then I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. Went to school for it, and before I knew it, I was living in New York City. Yeah.
My parents went to the theater a lot, did some community theater, so it was always sort of part of my life at a relatively early age, and they started taking me to the theater at a very early age. I mean, I think I was probably 5 years old at some point when I saw my first, understood what it meant for actors to be on stage, to be in the audience watching something, a story being told. And, and then I fell in love with cast albums. I mean, it's all very traditional in that respect. I mean, again, it has everything to do with why I get up there and do that number. My passion for that was, dropping the needle on the album, closing the door in my bedroom, and I was in a Broadway show, whatever that Broadway show might be. And And then again, great influences early on. I was very fortunate that where I grew up outside of Washington, D.C., at the Jewish Community Center in Rockville, Maryland, they had an amazing theater department that for kids. They had a great summer program for kids, and then all throughout the year. And I was taking classes. I was learning stuff that I would later learn, 5, 6 years later in college. At the age of 13, I was exposed to stuff like that. So, it was just something I always loved, and I never really had any question about what I was going to do. And again, very blessed to have the support of my parents, who I think also were encouraged early on by the people who said, yeah, he can do this. Yeah, he's not just, this isn't just, fun. There's something there that could turn into something. And then went to school, went to Boston University, and moved to the city and waited tables and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Brian, for you.
Very similar to both Christian and Brad in that I was a small kid as well, and my parents...
I wasn't small.
Oh,
I was
well,
never small. Matter of fact, I was actually rather large at one point, so that's where the story differs.
I beg your pardon.
Thank you.
I was a very large child, so that's how Brad and I are similar.
Thank you, Brian.
I was a kid. I was a very small kid, and I played sports a lot. And at about 8th grade, I realized that everyone else was growing and I wasn't, and so it was like that was going to be a problem for football. Although it didn't kind of stop me for a while, but then it did stop me pretty abruptly after a couple of hits. But I was always very interested in theater because my parents would take me to see shows in Detroit. I grew up in Michigan. And so I would see things at the Fisher Theater, and we'd drive down to see a show, but community theater. My sister was very involved in the theater, so I would kind of look up at her and watch what she was doing, and was kind of just in awe of watching all these people that I went to school with and would see in the hallways, would never have the opportunity or reason to talk to them, but then all of a sudden seeing, these kids become Cinderella or whatever character you're seeing. And there was something transformative about that, and it was kind of a mysterious thing to me that these people became something else, and it was just very magnetic to me. And so when I started doing it, it was always very. I always sang, and I always liked to sing, so it felt comfortable to do. But I'm kind of hopping around, but it wasn't really until I went to school at Northwestern and started studying acting that I decided that I was going to be an actor. Because I went to school thinking, I'll take advantage of the theater program and maybe audition for a show and go to college and maybe do a show. And then a whole bunch of things happened where I basically was forced to pick a major. And so I just kind of punted and said, well, I'll try theater. And once I started learning about it, like really studying it, and thought, it's not just dumb luck what happens on stage. People actually have craft and technique, and it seemed to be an endless supply of things to learn, and that fascinated me.
You all have these wonderful careers, so I'd like to mention some of your highlights, and just tell me what comes to mind, a favorite story or memory. Christian, I'm going to start with you. Co-starring in the Monty Python musical Spamalot and working with director Mike Nichols.
Yeah, that was a gift. Mike Nichols was a genius. I remember we were rehearsing for Spamalot, and the movie Closer had just come out, and there were all these, all the stars of Closer were doing interviews, and invariably the interviews would turn to discussions of Mike Nichols, and the way that these actors were talking about him was as if he was this deity walking amongst us, and I was like, I'm sure he's wonderful. What a track record. I'm sure he's amazing. And at the end of my Spamalot experience, he is, and he was, a god among us. The way he understood in his bones comedy, but not just comedy, storytelling, and the way he directed actors. I know Casey feels the same way. We just couldn't believe that we got to be in the room with him. And I think about him all the time. Also, learning comedy from being in a scene with Hank Azaria and David Hyde Pierce, the Bring Out Your Dead scene, was the first time that I realized in comedy that you don't have to drive ever forward. They were so confident and relaxed that they would say a punchline, the audience would laugh themselves out, and then the next guy would say a punchline, and the audience would laugh themselves out. And then I would come in with my line, because we're supposed to be driving forward, and the audience wouldn't really hear it because they were still laughing at the last thing, and then I'd be like, oh, okay, I blew that one. So then they didn't laugh at me. And then Hank would say something, and they'd laugh hysterically. So I finally, over the course of months, was like, oh, I just need to slow down, actually. It was fascinating to be in that cauldron of excellence.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that story. Brian, playing the Stoker, Frederick Barrett, in the Maury Yeston, Peter Stone musical Titanic. Fondest memories?
Getting to sing Barrett's song, which was such a great song, and so that was something that I knew I was really lucky to have that material in the midst of all of these great, beautiful, in this score that was so astoundingly beautiful, with all these incredible actors. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. Also, just kind of the sweetness of having achieved a certain level of success, winning the Tony after such a hard road, because it was a technically difficult show. And if any of you were around or remember that show, it was tough because, like Something Rotten, we didn't go out of town. And we opened cold on Broadway, and there was a lot of technical stuff that needed to be addressed that we had to kind of overcome during previews. And it was slow going. But finally we got there, and what a great feeling that was when we kind of felt like we had created the jigsaw puzzle just in time.
Brad, for you, playing Franz Liebkind, your Tony-nominated role in the Mel Brooks musical, The Producers, and then you played Max on Broadway, and then you did the show in London too, right?
Yes, yes. Oh, it was the gift that kept on giving. I mean, again, that whole experience was crazy for me. I did not start out as Franz. I mean, I was originally cast as a swing, which is an actor who stands by for any number of roles, like an understudy, only you're not on stage at all. You're only on stage if someone else is on. So anyway, it was a crazy ride, and we were out of town, and I ended up having to go on for Franz, and then I ended up assuming the role of Franz before we came back to New York to open. And so it was one thing after another, but again, to be in the room on that first day of rehearsal, with Mel Brooks and Susan Stroman and Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick and blah, 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 an entire company. Again, it was everything, that I had ever dreamed of, and I kept pinching myself along the way. But then the experience, and I just tried to stay in the moment because it was so heady, as this experience has been in a way for us too, because it's all happened so quickly and it's so intense. And things were asked of me that if I stopped to think about it, I could, do a number on myself. And I sort of just trusted that my love and my passion, if I'm in the room, if I'm here, I need to trust that I'm here for a reason, and that I am worthy, and that I can now play with, be on stage with Nathan and Matthew, who at that point, I did not know them personally. I knew of them, of course, my God. But so it was a great learning experience for me to trust myself, to say, you know what? Do what you do with, again, the guidance of these extraordinary people to help you along the way. And then things will play out as they play out. And yeah, it played out very well. Yes, and I always dreamt of Broadway, but going to the West End was something I never, ever thought would be possible.
How long were you there?
I was there for 4 months. Nathan went over and opened the show, but he was having back issues at the time, and so he really only did about the first 2 months of the run over there. It was a hard time for him. And and I'll never forget Susan Stroman calling me at home saying, honey, you want to go to London? I was like, oh my God, what? On vacation? Sure, yeah. You paying? I'm going, sure. And then I went over there for 4 months, and to live in that city was extraordinary, and and be treated well because I was starring in the show. So as far as all that goes, and being put up in a lovely flat and playing Theodore Royal Drury Lane and all the history of it all, it was crazy. It was crazy.
Do you mind if I hijack this? What are the major differences, like just in terms of like our rituals and like Broadway compared to West End?
Sort of
Did
very
you notice?
similar. I find that there's much more of a division between the legitimate theater and musicals over there. They do look at musicals in a slightly different way than we do. It's not nearly as ingrained in their culture. And when they do American musicals, it has an an even different slant in a way. Mind you, that being said, the audiences were terrific and just as responsive.
Christian, for you, your Tony Award-nominated role of Emmett in the musical Legally Blonde.
Yeah. What about it?
Fondest memories?
It was such a pleasure in that show. First of all, it was one of the first times that I'd experienced. Sweet Jerry Mitchell came to me. I saw him backstage at Spamalot, and he said, "I want you to do a reading. We're doing Legally Blonde the musical. I want you to do a part in it." And I'd seen the movie, and of course I immediately went to, oh, he wants me to play like the dorky, weird guy that Elle kind of helps with, like the really weird guy, not the Luke Wilson character, because why would I think that? But so then he was like, "No, Emmett." It was the first moment that I was like, "Wait, but what? But I hunch when I act, and I do funny things with my fingers. What are you talking about?" Like that's what I do. And so it was the first time that I felt like I could maybe just play someone close to myself, which was exciting. And then just to kind of be I considered him to be the still corduroy jacket amidst all that sea of pink. And that worked out well. But it was a blast from beginning to end. I was in it the whole time. I never wanted to leave. It was great.
Brad, playing Uncle Fester in The Addams Family.
Yeah. It was great. Oh my God, it was one of the most fun years of my life to play such an iconic role. It's always nice when you walk on stage and the audience sort of meets you halfway. If you're a star, that happens. You walk on stage, oh, look, there's Nathan. Oh, look, there's so-and-so. We meet them halfway because we've seen them before on film, on TV, on stage. We know what we're getting, or we know somewhat of that. So anyway, to play an iconic character like that the audiences mostly just love, was very joyous. And again, it was a great company, and I got to work with and know Roger Rees, who was an actor that I had admired for so very long, since I was a young child, and he made a splash here in the States with Nicholas Nickleby. Things like that, again, that really make an experience, double, triple in meaning and value in that respect.
Brian, your Tony-nominated role, Shrek the musical.
Thank you.
What are your fondest memories of that?
Fondest memories. Well, it was a great company of actors who were just. We did a lot. I mean, there's a lot that those actors had to do. Myself included, with the makeup and the costumes, and it was fun, but it was not without its challenges. And the thing the point I'm trying to make is that everyone was very appreciative of what I think we all had to go through, and particularly what I had to go through. So, my first couple of nights in Seattle, I didn't know what the process was of getting out of the makeup, getting into the makeup, and it was, it became very clear what that process was going to be, which is going to be long and laborious and filled with glue, and so. The company was there to they came in at the end of the show, our first preview, and they were just there and just cheering, and I'm sitting in the chair like this, what's happening? I hear someone outside, and but and then in New York they all gave me music to listen to, and it was just a great group of people, all a lot like Something Rotten, in the sense that a lot of great character actors who understood funny.
What is the best bit of advice that you've each been given, personally and professionally, that you live by?
Well, I live by something that my father told me. He wrote it down for me, and as a gift when I was in high school, and I think he was sensing my interest in doing this, and perhaps he was sensing my trepidation about it as well, and he wrote, I haven't read it in a while, but basically the gist is, if they are your career goals, you will always succeed. And so the trick to that being effective, I think, is being honest with yourself about what it is that you want and what it is that you're doing at this point in my life, because things change. And just reassessing and making sure. But if they are the things that you want to do, then you will be successful. And also, if you're going to be a ditch digger, be the best ditch digger that you can be. And work hard, and you'll see things bloom.
Yeah, I think to stay in the moment, which I spent a lot of money to learn. But to stay in the moment, to really, as an actor, it seems like such simple advice, because really that's what we should be doing every night. It's live theater. We have to stay in the moment, listen, react. But how it has spread over into my life as well, because it is, what we do is so self oriented, so ego, not ego in the sense of look how great I am, but ego in the sense that I am what I do and it's part of who I am. It doesn't define, it's not all that I am, but it is such a part. We bring ourselves to that stage every night, and it is a very risky, scary, wonderful thing. And so all the stuff that can get in the way of that, all the things that have happened or will happen or blah, 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 all we have is what is right now in that respect. And it's advice that has served me well, both on stage and off.
One of my dearest friends makes a practice out of being kind to people. And I think that works in the world, and I think it works in the workplace. And I sometimes fail at it. You know, you have your moments where like you're thinking of something else, and all of a sudden you've had an interaction with someone. You're like, oh, I was kind of a dick just now. That happens all the time. However, you can always just kind of reboot and remind yourself to go and take the extra. One of the most fascinating things watching this Jen Colella, what she does when she's out in public is, I always notice with strangers, with people, she always says one extra thing of kindness, and it makes people literally go like, I wasn't expecting another thing. And then people get disarmed, and then they kind of think for a moment, and then they say something kind back. It's a fascinating thing to watch, and she practices that every day, and I try to, and I fail often.
Well, I want to thank you three for one of the most wonderful afternoons. Thank you for spending it with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you all. Thank you for
The
coming.
stars of Something Rotten.